Hey guys, this is Kelly, and I wanted to go over today choosing the perfect lens. So many of us, when we're starting out, really have no idea what to choose. And there's so many different options on the market, and they're also really expensive. So I think, like most of you, I started off with one lens and I used my 35 millimeter for about 2 years before I decided that I wanted to expand and risk a new lens and learning something and taking on a big expense because let's be honest, for a nice lens, you're gonna drop maybe around $1,000, if not more. So I kind of wanted to give you a rundown of how I choose my lenses and in what scenarios I choose my lenses. So you want to ask yourself three things. How much space and distance will you have when you're shooting? I was living in France for a while and I was working in really small streets. You know, the really cute, quaint little neighborhoods when you think of Europe. Well, my 135 did not work whatsoever. And even my 85 millimeter was a little bit tough. So in that scenario, I always sort of stuck with my 35 millimeter and I was able to back up just enough. I'm primarily shooting portraits, families and kids. And so the 35 millimeter really came in handy. So what kind of dimension do you want to achieve? If you're looking to open your aperture really, really wide, say 1.8 to 2.0, that does sort of determine what lens you'll use because prime lenses tend to open up wider than zoom lenses. And I'll go over that really quickly. And then also, how quickly do you need to move? For example, in a wedding scenario, you might opt for a zoom lens because you have to sort of be stationary and take photos from a longer distance. And then maybe you want to grab some shots of guests that are a little bit closer. So you might have to be in one place and you might have to have the zoom capability to sort of take a variety of shots without moving your feet. So prime lenses versus zoom lenses. And for some reason, my photo wasn't showing up here, but I guess we'll skip over that. So the perks of prime lenses, they tend to be sharper overall. Their optics tend to be slightly better than zoom lenses, which I personally love. I'm a prime girl through and through. They're easier to carry and I'm kind of lazy. I don't like carrying a ton of gear around. And zoom lenses do tend to be on the heavier side. So prime lenses also have a higher aperture capability, meaning you can open up your aperture much wider than you can for a zoom lens, like I mentioned before. So for example, an 85 millimeter 1.4 has more compression capabilities, say, than the 70 millimeter 4.0. And when you take a look at the photos that you can produce, it tends to be a little bit nicer with a prime lens only because you're able to play with the background a little bit more. But in the case of wanting a zoom lens with a higher aperture, that can work great for landscapes and things like that. So you really just have to assess what you need. Prime lenses do tend to cost a little bit less than zoom lenses. It kind of depends. Obviously, there are plenty of prime lenses that are going to break the bank. But you can grab a 50 millimeter 1.8, I think for oh gosh, I want to say $150, which isn't bad. And when you're looking at a pretty decent zoom lens, you're paying upwards of $1,000. So you kind of have to assess your budget as well. Prime lenses do tend to have better low light performance because you can open your aperture a little bit wider. So that's always nice. And the perk of prime, you got to be moving your feet constantly. You're going to be running back and forth. You're going to be getting up close. You're going to run back to get those wide shots. So if you're looking for a little bit of exercise to add into your day, that is always a perk as well. And what we love about zoom lenses, the exact opposite. You can stay in one place. You don't have to move other than your finger. To zoom in and out. So that's fab. They're a little bit less intrusive. So for example, on a wedding day or even in a family portrait session, you don't have to be up in people's faces. So for example, with a 35 millimeter lens, if you want to get those up close shots, you are getting pretty close. So zoom lenses are really great if you kind of want to hang back and just sort of shoot from afar. They're great for events as well. And the great thing about zoom lenses is you don't necessarily have to pack 10 different types of lenses to get the different variety that you can get with, say, a 70 to 200. So the prime lenses that we love are the 24 millimeter. They're great for landscapes, those wide shots. The only issue is you're going to get a little bit of distortion because it is so wide, so keep that in mind. The 35 millimeter is such a versatile lens. I absolutely love it. They're great for both landscapes and portraits. Like I mentioned, I used a 35 millimeter for quite a while and I never had any complaints. You can really get a variety of shots and still get that really cool wide shot for your portraits as well. So you're moving your feet a lot, getting close up, far away, but it's absolutely a great lens. The 50 millimeter is definitely a popular choice for many wedding and portrait photographers. It has very little distortion and it's really budget friendly. So like I mentioned, a 50 millimeter 1.8, I think is about $150. A 50 millimeter 1.4 that Sigma just came out with, I don't know the exact price. I want to say it's a little bit heftier, 1,000 maybe. And then the 50 millimeter 1.2, I want to say you're getting upwards of 1,500. I'd have to check my prices, but don't quote me. But there is such a wide variety that you can get. But getting a 50 millimeter 1.8 is a really great starting point if you want a prime lens. My favorite lens is my 85 millimeter 1.4 by Sigma. It is fabulous. I get some really, really crisp images and the background is just phenomenal. So with an 85 millimeter, if you take your subject off the background just a tad, you can get the most beautiful blur and compression that I've found is a lot better than a lot of other prime lenses. So that's my go-to. I absolutely love my 135. You can get even better compression with the 135. The only issue is you have to have a lot of space. So a 135 is great for the beach. It's great for open fields. But when you're looking at smaller spaces, a 135 is not going to work indoors. It's not going to work in small cramped spaces like small streets. So be really mindful of your space. Indoor photography is tough because you have to get those wider lenses. So if you're working in like real estate, I'd go for a 24 millimeter. If you're doing newborn photography indoors, like lifestyle and posed newborn, I would go for a 35 millimeter or a 50 millimeter. And let's not forget that if you are shooting on a crop sensor camera, your focal length is going to be 1.5 times higher than a full frame camera. So for example, if you purchase a 35 millimeter and you put it on your crop sensor camera, that's going to act more like a 50 millimeter lens. So just keep that calculation in mind when you're purchasing lenses, because you don't want to get an 85 millimeter and then it turns out to be a 135. So again, keep that in mind. So here are some examples. The 35 millimeter is great, I said, for indoors. The 85 here is fabulous for the compression. If you can see, I shot this at like 1.4, I think. I was just playing around with it a little bit. And you can see how amazing it is on the flowers and the crispness of the flowers. But then look at her arm and look at the background. It's just, the compression is unreal. This I shot at the beach with my daughter and my husband. My 135, I absolutely adore it. But like I said, you have to be able to back up so far. I personally do not have a 50 millimeter lens. This is me, hello. But the photographer that I was working with to do my headshots, she actually had a 50 millimeter lens. So you can see that I really pop off the background here. And you can't really tell, but this is the Eiffel Tower in the background. But it does have some really great bokeh capabilities. So that's great. And then the 24 millimeter is so fab for landscape shots. It's just really wide and vast, and you can get everything you want in that shot. And what's really cool is to use a 24 millimeter for like portraits. And although you can't see this person's face, it's really cool to be able to include a person, in such a beautiful landscape shot. So zoom lenses that we love. The 2470 is really great for travel photographers, or if you're just kind of going on family vacations a lot. It's sort of this all-in-one lens because it opens up all the way to 24 millimeters, but then you can kind of go as close up as 70 millimeters, which is great. So it kind of covers the whole gamut of like landscape and portrait capabilities. And so it's really great. Canon, I believe, makes a 24 to 70 2.8 lens, which people absolutely rave about. A lot of people end up getting the 24 to 105 millimeter as a kit lens often. And I think it's a little underrated because people love it. I have heard so many great things. We actually got some photos done by a fellow Kohl's Classroom member, and she used the 24 to 105, and I'll show you a photo of what she was able to capture of my daughter, which I absolutely adore. So although it tends to be a kit lens, and kit lenses, some people say that they're not quite as great, I would have to disagree. This lens is absolutely fabulous, and it's also very versatile. And then the biggest one that you've probably heard of is the 70 to 200 millimeter lens. People absolutely love it for portraits, and also for weddings. This is a great lens to be able to stay stationary, and then you can get really beautiful shots from far away of, vows going on, or intimate moments with guests. So it's a great lens. The only downfall to this lens, it is freaking heavy. It's a beast. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. I actually purchased this lens when I first started out. Canon makes two different options, the 2.8 and the 4.0. So the 2.8 is obviously going to be a lot more expensive, but it does have the aperture capabilities, obviously. So if you're going to invest in this lens for, say, weddings, just make sure that you know the difference between the 2.8 and the 4.0. I think Tamron makes a lens as well, and I want to say Sigma makes the 70 to 200 as well. So take a look at the different options and sort of assess what capabilities you need. Are you working in low light? Are you wanting lower aperture capabilities? So just ask yourself these questions. So this right here is what she shot with a 24 to 105. As you can see, the compression is absolutely beautiful. She's really crisp in the photo, so it's great. And then this one here is a 70 to 200 shot at right around 70, I want to say. And it creates, you see how the family in the background is a little blurred out. This was a little pregnancy announcement, and so the starfish are a lot more crisp in the photo. So that's it, friends. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions whatsoever, and I will be happy to help. Thanks so much.